All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Front Row, Back Row podcast. My name is Dr. Owen Campbell. I'm the owner of Simplify Motion Physical Therapy in Phoenix, Arizona. And with me today is Dr. Brian Wolf. He is the owner of Evolution PT and Fitness in Connecticut and Long Island. How you doing today, Brian?
I'm good, man. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Eventually, we'll come up with an intro where it's not me just telling everybody who the same people are that I'm talking
Hopefully
to.
everyone knows who we are at some point. You know what I mean? That'd be great.
Yeah. So in our conversations last week, we were really discussing about how we can bring value to anybody listening to this. We're big believers in give away the information that you got, and then hopefully people will listen to it, think about it, and if they need more help, you can always get in contact us through our show notes and some of the stuff online that we put out. But honestly, I wish I had a good resource when I was starting out. It's not too long ago. Maybe four or 5 months ago, where I was going through all of this stuff. But I had to make 3 or 4 phone calls and really rely on the fact that I had a good 10 years in the PT space and contacts like Brian who would do this. So today we are going to cover how to set up your company. So these are the steps that maybe somebody might take while they may be still employed as a W-2, thinking about kind of getting out on their own, maybe starting their own side hustle and want some protection. Doing that all the way down to they've already said, you know what, I'm doing this. I'm starting. So we'll kind of go over some of the basics, things like how to, what's the difference between an LLC and an S-corp, the doing business as the DBA forms, is that a wise decision? And some of the other kind of ways, and of course, I lost the chat now, Brian. So hopefully we have good memories.
No, we're good. I got it. I got it.
Um, but we'll go over some of that stuff. And kind of just refresh a little bit. Some people this will be kind of old hat, but we're really trying to reach the people who maybe are thinking about this. I don't know. Is it as easy as they say? Is it actually kind of hard? So, I mean, Brian, kind of try and go back way back when you were doing this, man. What was that kind of headspace like?
I remember I wanted to start a business, and I was like, "How do I start? Right? And where
Yeah.
do I start?" And people said, "Oh, you get an LLC, a DBA, an S corp." And I made some mistakes in the beginning. They cost
Okay.
me money, right? And so I think there's a really good resource to really simplify this. And I'm gonna put some nuggets in here that I think will save you money. How's that?
Okay, cool.
Right?
Cool.
Like,
So I will take all the nuggets. Hopefully they're not because I've
yeah.
already kind of gone through it.
You
So hopefully I'm
probably not for you. You're unfortunately you have spent the money, but for other
I
people potentially listening to this, that'll be helpful. You know.
all right. Well, hey, you know what? Helping the listeners. That's what we're about.
Exactly. Exactly. You're a little too far at the moment, but
There we go. All right, I'm,
yeah.
I'm a lost cause. All right, so we'll frame this in the discussion of me just doing this, right? So I was at my previous job. I figured that I wanted to do this. Brian was very subtly telling me it's not if you do this, but when you do this, and finally I realized that. And what I first did was I looked up LLC, and one of the things that I knew I didn't really know the difference between LLC and S corp. I knew S corp was something that I would do if I wanted employees, or it's something about how you pay yourself differently. Now, again, just a disclaimer: we are not accountants, we are not attorneys. If you have specific questions about your specific situation, please consult someone who is a professional in this. We're just giving you an overview of what we're doing or what we've done. But what I did was I started with an LLC, and I did not go for the Facebook um, targeted advertising of call us, and for only $300 we'll set up your LLC. For me in Arizona, just go to the state board, or sorry, the Secretary of State, and I think the Corporation Commission in Arizona. A lot of states have a Corporation Commission, and they will walk you through kind of how to set it up.
Yeah, I think I gave you that
Um,
advice, right? You're still my
yeah,
advice.
actually,
Yeah.
oh yeah, okay. Well, then there you go. Take credit
There you
for
go. So I
it.
did save you that money. There you
Um, so that's what I did, and now I'm the proud owner of an LLC. And I have we can get into this later, but I also have a DBA. So my LLC is Arizona Health and Performance LLC, and my DBA, my doing business as, is Simplified Motion Physical Therapy. So I guess really what I think I want to know and the listeners want to know is what's an S corp. Like, what are
Yeah.
the
So
benefits?
so I think
And
this is
then
good.
well, what I want to do too, just before you go, I also want to know, like, down the road, man, is there going to be something I have to change? What do I have to think about? So, what are the differences initially, and then maybe what you might want to be thinking of down the road, given your future plan?
So what's cool is that you actually don't really need to change anything, right? You're
Oh,
set
okay.
up the way you just set stuff up. So that's what's cool.
Okay.
And the nugget that Owen shared that is key that I remember us having this conversation now
Yeah.
a few months ago when we were setting this up was going through something like LegalZoom or an attorney or an accountant. Again, to Owen's point, we're not any of those things. However, those are people that are actually going to charge you money to do it for you. When I realized I called one, I'm in Connecticut. We called one of the state board in Connecticut, and he just literally walked me through it, and he laughed. He's like, honestly, he's like, just call me anytime. Like we can help set you up, like, and make sure you do it correctly. And it's $50. At the time, it was $50. Whereas like an attorney will charge you $1,000 to start an LLC, and now I think it's up to like
No.
$125 in the state of Connecticut. And
Yeah.
so, now we have a
80,
partnership
80 in
LLC because
Arizona.
we have a partnership. But the main difference, to my understanding, and again, this is going to vary also state by state, but a DBA is going to be a doing business as it's going to offer you no liability protection financially.
Mm.
So ultimately, it is just my name, and it usually costs $8, and you can do it for in my area. I'm in Stanford. The city of Stanford literally just does a stamp on it, and boom, you've got your DBA. And so as you do an LLC, it also has a separate bank account along with a separate EIN number. So God forbid something happened, they sue you, they're suing the business essentially. Um, they're basically separate entities. So it wouldn't ruin your credit if like you went bankrupt, right?
Mm.
And essentially do that. Now, obviously, there's a loophole here in the sense of like if you go bankrupt, you go bankrupt, right? Like it's not
Yeah.
like it's not like the LLC is going to save you in that matter. But that's the understanding. An S corp, the big difference with an S corp is that like so our California businesses are S corps, is that everybody gets paid a W-2. So
Okay.
essentially, whereas taxes, and this is where it would be nice to have like a tax accountant at some point,
Mm.
talk about this. But basically, you pay quarterly taxes, at least in the state of Connecticut and federally, for an LLC. So basically, you collect the money and then you pay taxes. And S corp, you pay taxes as you go. And so essentially,
Okay.
you're a W-2 employee, so you would always have to pay yourself. So
Okay.
what I liked with an LLC was the flexibility to
Okay.
figure out what had to do, right? Right, what we had to do. There was times where I didn't pay myself. There was times where I paid myself more money. I never had to make a change. You starting out, it's a little less expensive because you don't need to get a payroll system of some kind. You don't need anything like that. And tax benefits wise, I've had multiple. Again, I'm not an accountant, but multiple accountants have told me it's better for tax purposes.
Okay. Yeah, and I know right now I'm doing some 1099 work, contracting work for someone as I'm getting my feet off the ground, and it just goes right to my LLC. So, I know for me, I'm happy with it, right? And I think that flexibility is what made me kind of. I probably read an article about an S corp once and decided not to do it. Now I have a friend who decided to go from an LLC to an S corp, right? So, like, what would make you? Is that something that you've considered in your business, or is that something that you know of people doing either after they form an LLC?
Yeah, so a great example of one of the things that happens with an LLC is you can write off certain things through LLC, right? Then
Okay.
obviously, and this is where I would get an accountant to talk with them about it, right? But an LLC as a sole proprietor is just brought as your income on a
Okay.
tax on a tax season.
Yeah.
However, when it comes to like writing stuff off through the LLC, right? Any medical equipment you acquire, any honestly a big one is gas to and from patients, right? Like between patients. So there with mobile PT practice for me it's gum for my physical therapists, stuff like that, like so no one's got
Yeah.
stank breath here,
Yeah.
it's very simple stuff like that,
Yeah.
that can all be written off through the business. As far as an S corp, the difference is there's two tax returns. So when you're a
Okay.
smaller business, because there's a second tax return now, for our business evolution we have two tax returns now. When
Yeah.
you're within that first $100,000 of income to the business,
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter either way. There are some advantages to being a S corp, from what I've been explained to,
Okay.
down the road, to a point where it's like, hey, you're going to give two specific, um, like two specific tax returns, because that ultimately will help you file a little separately through the business and then individually.
Okay, so what I'm getting here is that if you're someone like me, starting up, um, it's, at least for me, it was easier LLC. And then, like, this is where we kind of come down to every situation's different. Some people decide to go the S-corp route. Some people that, try to stay LLC all the way until they sell to one of the big boys, right? So it seems to me that it's kind of, pick your poison. But I will say the easiest route, I mean, super easy, was an LLC, man. It was
Yeah.
super cheap. Don't pay anyone to set it up for you. You can do it. I even got a PO box, so I didn't have people, calling, or, sending stuff to me. They send it to my PO box, right? Because you're publicly registered at that point. I'm talking more like junk mail. And I
Yeah.
also, one thing we didn't talk about before, but even getting like a phone system, there's some great ones out there that are $20 a month, $30 a month, and it's a
Google Voice.
text.
Google
Yeah,
Voice is
Google
free.
Voice. I use Spruce. I really like Spruce. It's HIPAA compliant, and so that way I don't feel too bad about like patients if anything comes back. But those are some of the things that I had in place before I even did it. And we can always talk websites, and we can talk that, um, some of those like kind of first startup things. But staying in that financial realm, staying in that, I want to create this company thing, this block that is my company versus, me and my wife's house and the kids and all that stuff. I guess, when would you want to bring in a CPA? Because that's an expense that any big enough business is going to need. You're going to have to file your taxes, um, especially as a business is more complicated. But is that something you search out right away and you put that money into somebody who can set you up like that, or is it something that deal with it at tax time, man?
Um, I don't think it's necessarily deal with a tax time. I think that that's one of those things where, because I'll give you a great example is to understand. I think the big thing we kind of talked about last week about understanding your cost requiring customer.
Yeah.
If there was one thing that I wish I did a better job of earlier, and it didn't really matter. It just was a lot more clerical work for me on the back end. It's understanding your numbers,
Okay.
and it's also understanding what numbers you need to understand, right? So
Yeah.
your cost acquiring customer, what's your gross revenue, what's your expenses, which is your net profit, and
Hmm.
and knowing kind of these different pieces, knowing what your cash flow is, knowing what that monthly looks like, right? And you can create predictions based off that. Because I think that's something that for most people, they're like, well, I don't know what I'm going to make, right? Particularly insurance. Like, how do I know what I'm going to get? It's like, well, you can see trends and I have an idea of what it's going to look like, right? And so that's what cash flow is there's a big
Yeah.
difference between that. So I think with getting a CPA, I honestly would recommend people getting CPAs pretty quick, because
Okay.
I think when it comes to, just from a standpoint of a CPA, they may help you get a write-off and
Yeah.
and essentially, save more money on your taxes that you're eventually going
Hmm.
to have to write them a check, but you didn't have to write it to the IRS.
Yeah. And I agree with you completely. So I was really fortunate. A friend of mine's brother, and actually a friend of mine anyway, um, he's a CPA. And he took a few of my kind of, hey man, I might do this calls for free. But of course, I wanted to pay the guy after I kept calling him a bunch. And I realized it was because I had to set up mentally, okay, if I get a few $100s here and a few $100s there, do I say in my head, man, okay, great, I can go and buy that new driver I wanted to look at, right? Or we can pay off that credit card from like something the kids did or whatever, right? Or should I be way more cautious because that's going to be taxed and that's going to be something I have to pay for and all that? So from a mental headspace, I know it really helped me getting that CPA. Now he didn't do much of anything because I wasn't making that much money, so it's not like there was forms and stuff he had to file. I don't, as you're starting, but my God, it was a good mental place to be so that I now know going into tax, now that I'm making a little bit, that I'm going to have to start declaring and taking his income and all that stuff, that I didn't screw it up in the beginning. Things like mileage, recording your mileage, getting one of those apps for it. If I didn't do that, and I figured out a tax time 3 months later, well, there's a few $1,000s that I can't claim. So
Yeah.
those are, I agree with you. I completely think that getting a CPA is a good thing.
Yeah, I think
Um,
I think too, on top of that, to be honest with you, when you think about a CPA and the value they can bring too,
yeah,
it's also like I also think it's a really good thing. Like, I used to do my taxes on my own.
yeah,
And so by doing my taxes using TurboTax and stuff like that, you can kind of understand what things you can write off and not write off, and understand
yeah,
like what are biggies, right?
yeah,
And so what it does, it allows you to be a little more knowledgeable when it comes
Yeah.
to what that person is going to want you to do,
Yeah.
and it's going to give you that. And so, listen, this isn't about breaking rules, bending rules. The U.S. government, you do not owe them any extra dollars than what you actually owe them,
Yeah.
right? So the
Yeah.
answer to anybody listening to this is, if someone's like, well, I want to pay my taxes and do my dues, it's like, yep, you're going to pay taxes. Trust me. They're going to get you. But the reality is
Yeah.
you definitely don't need to overpay. And
Yeah.
these are guys that are experts in helping you do that. And so, in essence, it will be a cost in some capacity, but it will certainly save you money in the long run. Because most people in our position without an accountant generally overpay.
Well, and that's it, right? I think Mark Kaufman, the founder of Athletico, he was famous in the early days for saying, we'll pay exactly what we're owed, or we'll get exactly what we're owed, not a dollar, not a dime more or a dime less." And he was talking
Exactly.
about collecting insurance and making sure that, when they're billing ethically to what they did, not overbilling, right? But also not underbilling, right? And not getting
Yes.
underpaid. Same thing with when you're starting a business, is making sure that, you are going to pay your taxes. It's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
But not paying too much, right? Given the government an interest-free loan, right, that they pay back eventually, or obviously not underpaying, right? Which I
Yeah.
get very, very mad at.
Well, 100%. Well, and also, I mean, realize this, like the people who are like, well, I got to start my business and blah, blah, and what I'm going to pay and what I'm not going to pay, blah. The reality is, like, I stimulate a lot of different pocketbooks for people and a lot of
Yeah,
different wallets.
yeah.
Jeff Bezos and I'm helping him out a lot. You know what I mean? He's making
Your
a lot
boy
of money
Jeff.
off us. So, like,
Yeah,
when you think about like these people that you're creating, I always look at it as you're spending your money. The government is not going to tax you on that because in essence they're going to tax the other person on that. So it's just not double taxation, right? They're not going to tax
yeah,
you for making the money and you spending the money. They're going to tax that ultimately where that money lands in someone's account. And so
right.
in theory the money's just kind of a circle. It's all, someone said that to me, an attorney told me
Yeah,
that. He was like, it's all a circle, right? I like when you pay an attorney to help you with something, right? That's tax
Mhm.
deductible. So like then they're going to take that money, they're going to pay somebody else, and like it just moves
Yeah,
in that direction. So it's when it stops into someone's bank account and idles there, that's when the IRS decides to take it out. And it's just a matter of, so if you that's a kind of a
right.
tip for people. If you keep money moving,
Yeah,
in essence, obviously, if you're taking money for yourself, that's going to get taxed. But ultimately, it's one of those things where to me, the LLC, kind of going back to what we're talking about, the LLC is the best way to start, and I don't really
yeah,
see a reason for us to stop it. We already do, again, we have a partnership LLC, so we end up filing to a personal and a
yeah,
business return, and that works quite well. So it just allows
yeah.
us to operate the way we work. And again, the way that works to people listening, again, the other tax pieces, I get a K1 at the end of the year, which just reports what my income is with an LLC, which an accountant would give me. And on the flip side, that you basically are going to get a W-2 just like you would as an employee if you're an S-corp. That's the
Got
difference,
it.
and then you're going to pay those taxes that way.
Yeah, and again, this is all insider baseball stuff, right? Something that is very important when you're in it, right? Obviously, there might be people completely tuned out of this because they've either already done it or they're in that early nebulous phase of like, man, I might want to start my own practice or I might want to start my own business. But I guess the biggest key here and is that you really want to keep your ducks in a row when you're starting out. You want to make sure you're protecting yourself when you're doing this. And I guess the mindset that I think somebody should really be in when they're doing this stuff is you don't want to overcomplicate because it really is not that hard. The U.S. government wants more businesses. It's generating income and all that stuff, right? But yeah, do your research, do your homework. If you can at least have honestly, I had a half an hour phone call with a CPA and a lawyer, got all my questions asked, and it was free. And for them, they're looking, well, okay, if this guy does anything, he's going to call me, right?
Yeah.
So call a local guy, call a recommendation, go through some of your networking groups, and just ask questions, because they're going to know your state better than us. But at the same time, think of it, don't overcomplicate it. It's not as hard as you think it is. It's
Yeah.
what I want to say to people.
I would agree. I would agree with that completely. I would agree with that completely.
Yeah.
Is don't overcomplicate it. It's actually super simple. I was afraid. I was like, the government's going to
Oh,
destroy my business. I hadn't even
yeah.
seen a patient yet, and like the
Yeah.
reality is like that's not how this works. Like to
Yeah.
go into it perfectly, like you make money. They make money off of you, and
Yeah.
the rest of the country makes money off of you doing this. So the
Yeah.
answer is right. Like if you call, that's what the Secretary of State's job is to make sure that stuff. So calling local governments like of your state would be the
Yeah.
first place to start.
Yeah.
And what happens is a lot of these attorneys and a lot of these like legal fee, legal Zooms
Mhm.
know that you don't understand this. So they
Yeah.
cater and they say, hey, what we're going to do is we'll help you set this all up. And the
Yeah.
reality is you can just do it on your own.
That is a whole other podcast. Like how much money do you challenge me to spend on stuff that I could do for free?
100%. I mean, there's so many things you can spend.
Yeah.
So it's like again, it's super easy. I joke now, and I have friends that are attorneys that have helped us out. But I joke that I used to think that maybe I'm doing something wrong because I never got attorneys involved, and then I started getting attorneys involved and realized how freaking expensive they were. And I was like,
Yeah.
it's okay not to have them involved.
Yeah.
I would almost do the reverse of thinking. If you're getting attorneys involved, you're probably doing something wrong. How's that
Yeah.
sound? Right. So it's more on that particular side.
Great. All right. Well, that recaps our the kind of detail portion of I guess starting. It's not the fun stuff like, oh man, who do you call and what's your niche and all that, but it's the absolutely important stuff that you got to get right to start off. Um, and we hope that anybody listening to this has taken away some good tidbits, something that they can use. Like I said in the show notes, there is a way to contact us, and we're on social with either our company, Simplify Motion Physical Therapy, or Evolution PT and Fitness. Happy to talk. It doesn't cost a thing. We'd love to be able to reach out and help out in any way we can. So. That's what I gotta say, Brian. Anything else you want to say before we go?
No, that's it. I mean, leave comments on our YouTube stuff. We can always respond back.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
good too.
Anyone more than our wives watching it, we're really happy. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly. Someday when we're not famous or when we are
I got
famous.
some former colleagues who said they watched it. Don't know if they have or not, but
All right. Well, we're there. We're there. We're
there
getting
you
there.
go. We got a logo now, so we're good. We're official.
Exactly.
All right, man.
All right.
Adios.
Thanks, man. See ya.
Yeah.